The other day, I randomly thought of Bill Whittle and his show Afterburner. I remember liking it a lot, but I've also changed a lot since then, and I wondered if I'd find him still as good as I did back then. His monologues were always so on point and direct, always so much more refined than anybody else at the time. I always figured he would be bigger. Looking around now, I guess he's still doing stuff, but he's just really not on my radar anymore. So let's go through this video I found called 3.5 Days. It's from 2011.
Well, hi everybody, I'm Bill Whittle, and this is Afterburner. Well, there are protesters in several major American cities using their iPads at Starbucks to make Facebook and Twitter updates on the evils of corporations, and you don't know whether to laugh or cry, honestly.
This was such a cliche talking point, even from 2011. It's since become a literal meme, the concept of criticizing society while also being a part of that society. You're a hypocrite, supposedly. This is ridiculous on its face, and I'm glad I don't see a lot of the right using this stupid argument anymore. We know that companies like Apple had to put netting outside of their factories because so many people were committing suicide because of the working conditions. If I tweet about how messed up that is, or use my iPhone in any way to expose what's happening there, am I a hypocrite?
What we're seeing here, I think, are the self-esteem movement's chickens coming home to roost.
Ah, yes, the self-esteem movement coming home to roost. This has been the talking point forever, and it's just not true. I'm not sure what the percentage of people are that get insane degrees like lesbian dance theory, but I'm sure it's pretty low. Here, Bill is openly mocking people for pointing out that even though you can graduate college, you still aren't guaranteed a good paying job or a nice car or a job with benefits. And that would be hilarious if it wasn't for the fact that Bill Whittle's generation, the boomers, all could have those things by being a lowly milkman. And if they were smart enough to go to college, it wasn't hundreds of thousands of dollars to get in. Here in 2011, he's mocking people for getting dumb degrees and failing to do anything with them. And that's fine. It's an easy group to pick on. But it fails to address all the people who did get good degrees and still fall in this category. Or people who never went to college at all and still feel the crunch of the economy and the unfairness of what the corporations do to us.
These kids are upset because the $100,000 of debt they took on in order to get their degree in bitterness studies isn't paying off with a six-figure job and a car and full benefits at an organic farm collective. I feel genuinely sorry for these people, I really do. These are people that are born under the asymptote, and I'll get to that in just a second. You know, if you look deeply into human history, you'll see that every civilization collapses the same way. They're not overrun by barbarians, that happens later. No, they fail because of their success. Prosperity makes them lazy and breeds a sense of entitlement.
Not boomers, though. No. That never happened to them. Ever.
They're trapped under the asymptote. Let me show you what I mean. Here's an exponential curve. Now, this is what life looks like for a growing and healthy civilization. You work hard and the quality of your life improves. Every day, things not only get better, they get better faster.
First off, this graph is insane. The graph really looks like this. This is more of the boomer truth regime patting itself on the back for being so good and exaggerating its accomplishments, while it's all of us young people that are the problem. Secondly, infinite growth is really the problem with capitalism. It's unsustainable and it's impossible to maintain. And basically, at this point, our economy is just a ton of different bubbles all waiting to pop when the infinite growth hits the reality that it can't infinitely grow anymore. Let's go back to Bill whining that these college grads can't buy a home. Well, why is that? We were always told that homes are investments. That means that they go up in value all the time, becoming more and more profitable. The same thing happens in crypto. The idea is you get in now when the value is low, and over time it increases in value, and then you sell. But you never want to be the sucker that buys when the value is high. Except that's where we are in the housing market after 50 years of the housing market doing exactly what the housing market was advertised to do. So let's look at the housing market over time. In 1960, the median home value was $11,900 and the median income was $5,600. That makes a ratio of basically 2 to 1. Now, the average home costs $408,100, and the median income is around $36,000, making a ratio of 11.3 to 1. But yeah, let's just keep hating on the lazy millennials. Oh, they're so terrible.
But then something happens. The prosperity curve becomes asymptotic. Things still get better, but by smaller and smaller and smaller amounts as time goes on. These people don't know what they're protesting, but I do. They're protesting the fact that they've never been hungry, never been cold, never been without TV and air conditioning in a car. They've always had a video game console and a laptop and a smartphone, and they never, ever had to do any long, hard, real work for any of it. They were born into a level of prosperity so pervasive that the very idea of a difference in prosperity became vulgar and disgusting to them. These kids couldn't even become relatively more or less prosperous on the soccer field because having winners means having losers. And these precious snowflakes have been told how wonderful and unique they are their entire lives. And everyone has always come in first place.
It's so funny to see people jump through a million hoops to convince themselves and others that somehow people born after 1985 are completely different than they were when they were young. They're so different, almost like a different species of human. The reality is boomers were the first spoiled generation, and this is something you learn from AA's Boomer Truth Regime. Everything he's saying about millennials applies to boomers, but the economy wasn't completely trash back then. It's so weird to say that our country has gone down the crapper, but also that young people should be doing exactly what boomers did when they were young, when the country wasn't down the crapper yet. As Tucker Carlson pointed out recently, if you were born in 1969, you came into a country with 200 million people. Today, that number is 334 million. That is a lot of new people in a relatively small amount of time. How is that going to affect housing, jobs, colleges, ER waiting rooms, crime, mental health? It affects every aspect of everything. But sure, we're all just lazy apparently. And even despite all of that, right now the unemployment rate is 4%. So 96% of everybody is working. But we're all lazy.
Only now, they're out in the real world, and the real world keeps score.
Except now we know that it doesn't. As I pointed out in my very first video on this channel, the idea that these crazy kids would have to grow up and meet reality never happened. Think of how much BS happens in our society today because these mindsets have taken over almost every area of it.
You know, I could cure this asymptotic disease. I could stop the rise and fall of civilizations. I really believe I could, because at its core, this isn't about corporations or the economy or what they paid for their bad education. What it's really about is ingratitude. Ingratitude and entitlement and an utter lack of perspective. So, I'd provide some perspective, and I'm afraid I'd have to do it by force. You see, to cure this sickness, I would take from every single American between the ages of 10 and 60, say, 1% of their life every year. There are 365 days in a year, so 1% of that is 3.6 days, so we'll just round it down. We'll say 3.5 days. And during those 3.5 days, I would force everyone to live out in the woods in a cabin. I wouldn't make anyone chop wood. If you want to shiver through 3 nights, that's your business. I'd make people carry their own water up from the river. Hey, if you don't want to go to the trouble to boil it, be my guest. Recovering from amoebic dysentery will be part of your education. I'd make everybody grow and harvest their own food, or dig up roots, or collect berries, or not. You can sit and complain about it and not eat for 3.5 days if you'd prefer. And like most modern Americans, I have a soft spot for little furry animals. But I would make people trap and kill and skin them in order to stay alive. That goes for chickens and fish as well. You see, reality can be ugly and bloody and horrible. And that's something that those protesters have been protected from their entire lives, but not anymore. Playtime is over now. Now, I think that after 3.5 days spent working hard, gathering food, chopping wood, and carrying water, night times spent with no iPad, no smartphone, no Wi-Fi, no DVDs or Xboxes, I think that would be just enough to make people like this appreciate the fact that there are people out there who will do these things for you. I think 3.5 days out there every year for 50 years would make you very grateful That there are groups of people willing to pump and purify your water, provide endless and affordable electrical power so you can be 72 degrees all the time. That there are people who will kill, clean, cook, package, and deliver food so that you don't have to see the blood or the dirt, all of those things. And that these groups of people who provide these services are called corporations.
Now, I agree with his concept of having people experience the tougher side of life to get some perspective. But what I don't like is him being an unadulterated simp for these corporations. It never entered his mind that a corporation could do anything wrong, or be infiltrated by leftists, or conspire with the government to screw you, the average citizen, over. Most of those dumb kids who are complaining about corporations wouldn't mind working for one, doing the essential work that Bill admits keeps our society moving, if, and that's a big if, they're compensated fairly. And that's where Bill and I split ways. Corporations have not compensated people fairly for doing the hard work that keeps this whole thing going. This is the point that Mike Rowe misses as well, and I've got a video coming out about him soon. He can't understand why people are quitting and leaving the workforce, why there's 10 million open jobs. Because the truth is they're crap jobs that aren't worth it for what you're being paid. They don't make sense anymore, and that's why they remain unfilled. That's the bottom line. And it's people like Bill Whittle and Mike Rowe that they can never understand that if these are so essential to making everything work, then why does the pay not reflect that? And why can't Bill Whittle see that corporations would rather see the whole thing burn to the ground than pay people or give them benefits? Why, if you work in construction, you can make homes but never afford one yourself? That's the idea here. I know it hurts the ego of the boomers who act like they would do these jobs for free, but reality isn't like that.
Who feed their own selves and their own families by doing these ugly, difficult, unpleasant things for you and charging more than it costs. There are people out there doing that right now, not for 3.5 days. They do it every day. They're called farmers, and they work for corporations called Kraft and Green Giant and Monsanto. You should be grateful, and you should thank them. And there are people out in the Gulf of Mexico and the North Sea wrestling with steel beams the size of automobile transmissions in 60-mile-an-hour winds to bring up the oil to charge your iPad and run your AC and your Xbox and your Prius. They work for companies called Exxon and Shell and BP, and you should be grateful and you should thank them. Now, 3.5 days is all I need. What those protesters need is to grow up.
When the corporations bring in immigrants to replace you, you aren't supposed to feel anger at them, I guess. When they move jobs out of your town to a different country, I guess you can't get mad. You should be thanking them. When they stagnate wages for 40 years, I guess you can't get angry. When they subvert the culture and use military-grade propaganda on you and your children, you should actually be thanking them for that. When they manipulate our food to be so far from normal that everyone is sick and fat and cancer-addled, we should thank them for that. When the government and healthcare conspire in the middle of the night to pass a bill that forces every American to buy a product from a huge corporation, we should be thankful for that. When Pfizer stands to make $54 billion from colluding with the government to mandate that you either get the jab or lose your job, we should be thankful. When big corporations, like the energy companies in Texas that charge people $9,000 for their heat bill, they should have been thankful. It's the corporations that want to eliminate truck drivers and automate their jobs. We should just be thankful, I guess. We should be thanking corporations that censor us on big tech platforms for speaking the basic truths like men cannot be women. We should thank the government for telling the corporations which people to silence, because the truth is corporations have become the unofficial arm of the government to do all of the social engineering and all of the cultural manipulation that the government is not legally allowed to do, all while hiding behind a faceless, nameless corporation that is accountable to no one but the government who it's in cahoots with in the first place. We should just be thankful for the destruction of our society by these corporations. Whoops, my bad. I just didn't see it at first, but now that Bill puts it that way, I see the error of my ways. Boomer truth is crumbling by the day because the insults that each side have are becoming hollow. The left can only ever call you racist, and the right can only ever call you lazy. What Bill doesn't realize is that there's more to life than line goes up. Surely, there has to be a middle ground between living in the wilderness like Ted Kaczynski or having a job that pays decent. And over the decades, people are tired of the corporations winning the negotiation battle, and COVID exposed them for what they are. It doesn't matter how long you worked at your job, how good you were. If your name comes up red, you're gone. Your loyalty is not reciprocal. And it's not just Bill. It's that whole brand of National Review-style conservatism where it's unclear exactly what they're conserving besides providing protection and excuses for leftist-owned corporations to destroy America. As with so many libertarian types, everything they love turns into everything they hate, and in their confused little brains, they can't ever figure out why. Corporations weren't supposed to do all of this, apparently. And they can only entertain a cartoon version of any opposition. It will always be the dumb college grad who is upset that they can't find a job with their useless degree. There's no more serious thought put into it. It's easy to be right when you strawman everything, and that's what Bill Whittle's doing here. Anyways, that's all the time I have for today. If you enjoy this type of video and type of content I'm making, please give this video a like and consider subscribing. I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.